Why trying too hard makes us miserable. Everywhere you look today, the message is the same. Be positive, stay motivated, think happy thoughts, visualize your dream life and it will come true. Scroll through social media and it feels like everyone else has figured it out. Perfect mornings, perfect relationships, perfect confidence, perfect lives. And slowly, without realizing it, a quiet question forms inside you. Why don't I feel like that? Here's the uncomfortable truth this book begins with. The harder you try to be happy, the more unhappy you often become. Not because happiness is bad, but because chasing it the wrong way creates suffering. When you constantly tell yourself, I must be happy, what your mind actually hears is something is wrong with me right now. Every forced smile, every motivational quote, every attempt to fix yourself becomes proof that you're not enough as you are. Mark Manson opens The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck with a bold, refreshing honesty. Life is difficult. Struggle is unavoidable. Pain is part of the deal. And pretending otherwise doesn't remove pain, it multiplies it. Because now you're not just struggling, you're also ashamed for struggling. This book isn't telling you to stop caring, and it's definitely not telling you to become cold or emotionless. It's teaching something far more powerful. You don't need to care about everything. You don't need to chase happiness at all costs. You need to choose what truly deserves your energy. The moment you stop fighting reality, the moment you stop demanding constant happiness, is the moment your mind begins to feel lighter. And that is where real freedom begins. Modern culture has turned positivity into an obsession. We're told that if we just think positively enough, life will magically fall into place. Open any social media app and you'll see it. Perfect bodies that never seem to age, perfect relationships with no conflict, perfect careers with constant growth and passion, and none of it looks real. Yet it feels convincing. So when you wake up feeling tired, when your progress feels slow, when your relationships feel complicated, you don't think, life is hard. You think, something must be wrong with me. This is where positivity becomes toxic. Mark Manson introduces a powerful paradox. The desire for positive experiences is itself a negative experience. Because the more desperately you want to feel good, the more you notice when you don't. And that awareness turns into frustration. Frustration turns into self-judgment. Self-judgment turns into shame. We're not taught how to sit with pain. We're taught to distract ourselves from it. But pain is not a malfunction. It's feedback. When you reject pain, you reject an essential part of being human. Struggle, doubt, fear, failure, these are not signs that life is broken. They are signs that life is happening. The problem is not pain. The problem is avoiding pain at all costs, because avoidance slowly shrinks your life. You stop taking risks, you stop being honest, you stop growing. A meaningful life doesn't eliminate struggle, it chooses struggle. It chooses discomfort that leads to growth. It chooses challenges that align with your values. It chooses pain that has purpose. And once you understand that, you stop asking, why is this hard? And you start asking, is this struggle worth it? And once you realize you can't avoid pain, the next question becomes, what is actually worth caring about? Let's clear up the biggest misunderstanding in this entire book. When people hear the phrase, not giving a f, they imagine someone careless, rude, or detached, someone who ignores responsibilities, someone who doesn't try, someone who doesn't care about anyone. But that's not what this is about at all. Mark Manson is not teaching indifference. He's teaching discernment. Not giving does not mean being rude to people, avoiding responsibility, living without values. It means something far more intentional. It means you stop chasing approval from people who don't matter. It means you stop reacting emotionally to every opinion, comment, or judgment. It means you protect your attention because your attention is your life. Think about how often your energy gets drained. A comment online, a comparison with someone else, a small mistake you replay again and again in your mind. None of these things truly deserve your emotional investment, yet they steal it anyway. Here's the truth. Your ability to care is limited. Every time you care deeply about something trivial, you lose energy for something meaningful. When you give your attention to everything, nothing receives your best. Maturity isn't about caring less, it's about caring better. It's realizing that peace doesn't come from controlling the world, it comes from controlling where your energy goes. When you choose carefully what deserves your concern, life becomes simpler, decisions become clearer, and emotional chaos begins to fade. Because you finally understand one thing. You can't care about everything, and you were never meant to. So, choose wisely. But what happens when we care too much about our thoughts and emotions themselves? That's where the real mental trap begins. Let's talk about a kind of suffering most people don't even realize they're creating. It starts small. You feel anxious, maybe your chest tightens, your mind starts racing. That part is human. But then something else happens. You notice the anxiety and immediately judge yourself for it. Why can't I just relax? What's wrong with me? Other people don't feel like this. Now the anxiety has company. You're no longer just anxious, you're anxious about being anxious. This is what Mark Manson calls the feedback loop from hell. Emotion to judgment to more emotion to more judgment. The original feeling wasn't the real problem, your resistance to it was. And the harder you try to escape the feeling, the stronger it becomes, because the mind interprets resistance as danger. It thinks, if I'm fighting this emotion, it must be a threat, so it amplifies it. This is why forced positivity doesn't work. Telling yourself, just be calm, just be happy, just think positive, only adds another layer of pressure. The real solution isn't positivity, it's acceptance. Not resignation, not giving up, but honest acknowledgement. Instead of asking, why am I like this? You ask, this is what I feel right now. Can I allow it to exist without fighting it? The moment you stop resisting, the loop breaks. The anxiety may still be there, but it no longer controls you. Pain loses its grip when it's no longer treated as an enemy. You don't overcome emotions by defeating them, you overcome them by letting them pass. And paradoxically, when you stop trying so hard to feel better, you actually do. Once we stop fighting our emotions, the next question becomes, what actually deserves our energy? That's where values come in. This might be the most uncomfortable idea in the entire book. You are not special. Not uniquely gifted, not destined for greatness by default, not exempt from struggle. And strangely, that realization can feel like relief. Because when you believe you're special, you also believe you should have more success, more happiness, more recognition. And when life doesn't deliver that, you feel cheated. Mark Manson explains that a deep sense of entitlement, the belief that we deserve a pain-free, constantly rewarding life, is a major source of modern misery. We're told, you're special, you're meant for more, you should always stand out. But this creates pressure. Pressure to perform, pressure to prove, pressure to be exceptional all the time. And when everyone is trying to be special, comparison becomes unavoidable. Someone is always ahead. Someone is always happier. Someone is always winning. That's exhausting. The truth is simpler and far more liberating. You don't need to be extraordinary to live a meaningful life. You don't need applause. You don't need constant validation. You don't need to outshine anyone. Meaning doesn't come from feeling superior. It comes from taking responsibility. Responsibility for your choices. Responsibility for your values. Responsibility for how you show up, even when no one is watching. When you drop the need to be special, you gain something better: freedom. Freedom to learn without ego, freedom to fail without shame, freedom to improve without comparison. Your worth is not measured by how exceptional you appear, but by what you're willing to commit to. And that's good news, because responsibility is something you can choose every single day. When you stop chasing the feeling of being special, you can finally focus on what actually matters. And that brings us to values. Everyone says they want happiness, but almost no one talks about what happiness actually demands. Because happiness isn't the absence of problems, it's the presence of better ones. Every path in life comes with difficulty. Success has problems: pressure, responsibility, fear of failure. Strong relationships have problems: misunderstandings, vulnerability, hard conversations. Personal growth has problems: discomfort, self-doubt, letting go of old identities. The mistake we make is thinking there's a life without struggle. There isn't. So the real question becomes, which problems are worth solving? Do you want the problem of discipline or the problem of regret? Do you want the problem of honest effort or the problem of constant dissatisfaction? Mark Manson reminds us, what you're willing to struggle for determines the quality of your life. A meaningful life isn't built on ease, it's built on meaningful struggles. Struggles aligned with your values, struggles that move you forward, struggles you choose again even on the hard days. When you try to avoid all problems, you don't find peace, you find stagnation. No growth, no progress, no depth. But when you consciously choose your problems, you take control of your direction. You stop asking, how can I be comfortable, and start asking, what discomfort is worth it? That shift changes everything, because growth doesn't come from comfort, it comes from commitment. And the right problems don't drain you, they shape you. But how do you choose the right problems? It starts with understanding your values. If there's one idea in this book that quietly controls everything else, it's this: your values shape your life, not your goals, not your emotions, not your motivation, your values. They determine what you pursue, what you avoid, and what kind of problems you choose to solve. Most people don't consciously choose their values. They absorb them from culture, from social media, from comparison. And that's where things go wrong. Mark Manson explains that many of our values are broken, not because they're immoral, but because they're fragile. Bad values sound attractive, but they're unstable. Pleasure at all costs, popularity, money as identity. Why? Because they depend on things you can't fully control. You can't control being liked. You can't control constant happiness. You can't control how much respect others give you. So when life pushes back, and it always does, those values collapse. And when your values collapse, so does your sense of meaning. Good values work differently. They are internally controllable: responsibility, growth, integrity, honesty. You can choose to be responsible. You can choose to improve. You can choose to act with integrity, even when it's uncomfortable. Good values are also reality-based. They accept that life includes pain, mistakes, and limits. They don't promise constant pleasure, they promise progress. And most importantly, good values are growth-oriented. They encourage learning instead of ego, effort instead of image, depth instead of validation. When you shift your values, your direction changes automatically. You stop chasing empty wins and start building something real. You don't need a new personality. You don't need perfect motivation. You just need better values. Because when your values are solid, your life becomes resilient. And resilience is freedom. When your values are clear, decision-making becomes simple. Now let's talk about failure and why it's essential. There's a simple truth most people avoid because it feels uncomfortable at first. You may not be responsible for everything that happens to you. You didn't choose your childhood. You didn't choose certain losses. You didn't choose every obstacle in your path. But you are always responsible for how you respond. And that distinction changes everything. Blame feels comforting. It gives you a story. Someone else is at fault. Circumstances are unfair. Life is against you. But blame comes with a hidden cost. When you blame, you give away your power. Because if something isn't your responsibility, you can't change it. Responsibility feels different. It feels heavy. It feels demanding. It forces you to look inward. But responsibility is also liberating. The moment you say, "This is my problem to deal with," you reclaim control, not over the world, but over your actions. Mark Manson emphasizes that responsibility doesn't mean self-punishment. It means ownership. Ownership of your choices, ownership of your boundaries, ownership of your direction. When you own your problems, you stop waiting to be rescued. You stop expecting life to be fair, and you start asking, "What can I do next?" That shift turns suffering into progress. Because power doesn't come from avoiding hardship. It comes from facing it directly with honesty and courage. Responsibility doesn't limit you. It frees you. When responsibility becomes your strength, failure stops being something to fear. It becomes a teacher. Most people are taught to fear failure. From an early age, failure is framed as something shameful, a sign that you're not good enough. So we learn to avoid it. We play it safe, we lower expectations, we stay where it's comfortable. But Mark Manson challenges this idea directly. Failure isn't the opposite of success, it's the price of admission. Every meaningful achievement is built on mistakes, missteps, and moments of discomfort. When you avoid failure, you don't protect yourself, you limit yourself. Because avoiding failure also means avoiding feedback, and feedback is how you grow. Growth demands discomfort. It demands facing evidence that you're not there yet, that something didn't work, that you need to adjust. Failure, when viewed honestly, isn't punishment, it's information. It tells you what matters, what doesn't, what needs improvement. The difference between people who grow and people who stay stuck isn't talent, it's their relationship with failure. One group sees it as a verdict, the other sees it as a teacher. When you stop taking failure personally, you start using it productively. You don't ask, "What does this say about me?" You ask, "What can this teach me?" Every failure carries a lesson, but only if you're willing to listen. And the more failures you allow, the faster you learn. When failure stops being the enemy, clarity begins to emerge. So, what does a meaningful life really look like? Here's one of the most uncomfortable yet powerful truths in the entire book. You are going to die. Not someday in theory, but actually, inevitably. And strangely, this isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to wake you up. Mark Manson argues that death isn't depressing, it's clarifying. Because when you truly accept that your time is limited, your priorities change. Suddenly, petty arguments feel smaller. Other people's opinions lose their grip. Chasing approval feels pointless. Death reminds us of something essential. Your time is finite. Your energy is precious. Your attention is limited. You don't get infinite chances. You don't get infinite focus. You don't get infinite emotional bandwidth. So the question becomes, what is worth caring about? When you live as if you'll live forever, you waste energy on trivial things. You overthink, you procrastinate, you delay what matters. But when you remember death, you simplify. You choose relationships over ego, meaning over appearance, depth over distraction. This is the ultimate form of not giving a fuck. Not indifference, but discernment. You stop caring about everything so you can deeply care about the few things that truly matter. Death doesn't make life meaningless. It gives it urgency. It gives it focus. It gives it weight. And in that awareness, life becomes sharper, clearer, and more intentional. Care wisely, because not everything deserves your care. When you accept your limits, you finally learn how to live. After all the ideas, the paradoxes, the uncomfortable truths, everything in this book comes down to something simple. A meaningful life isn't complicated. We make it complicated by caring about too many things, and most of them don't matter. Mark Manson doesn't ask you to stop caring. He asks you to care wisely. Care about fewer things, but care about better things. Care about your values. Care about your responsibilities. Care about the people and work that give your life substance. Accept pain, not as a flaw, but as part of being alive, because a life without pain is a life without depth. Take responsibility, not to punish yourself, but to reclaim your power. Responsibility isn't a burden, it's direction. And live honestly, with yourself, with others, with your limitations and your strengths. Honesty simplifies everything. When you stop pretending, stop comparing, stop chasing validation, life becomes quieter, clearer, lighter. That's the subtle art, not indifference, not numbness, but intentional living, choosing what deserves your care and letting go of the rest. If this message resonated, take a moment to reflect. What are you giving your energy to that doesn't deserve it? You don't need to fix everything in your life. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to please everyone. And you don't need to be perfect to move forward. What you need is clarity. Clarity about what truly matters and the courage to let go of the rest. Because your time is limited, your energy is valuable, and your attention is sacred. When you choose wisely, life becomes lighter, quieter, more intentional. That's what this channel is about. If you're looking for ideas that don't overwhelm you, but ground you, if you want wisdom that's honest, practical, and rooted in real life, then this is your place. Subscribe to Insight Beam for clear thinking, deep ideas, and simple truths that help you live better. And remember, you don't need to care about everything, just the right things.